Good day, life science students. Welcome to video lecture episode 22. We're going to continue our discussion like we started last time by reviewing material from earlier in the year. We're going to move on to now chapter 9, plants. And remember, when we talked about plants, we talked about plant habitats, we talked about plant classifications. Now remember, plant biology is also known as either botany or phytology. Just wanted to remind you of that just really quickly. And when we think of plants, remember there's things we think of like our socks that we wear. People that use medicine with plants, it's called herbal medicine. We think of places like the Amazon rainforest. We even think about people who have a vegetable garden. We even think about the pencil that we write with or the paper we write on. Those are just some examples of when we think of plants, all right? Now remember I also showed you some pretty cool pictures, like there was that hanging garden. There was also where they had cut out that area for the train to be able to travel through, and also the tulip garden, which is over in Europe. People also, when they think about plants, they tend to think about trees, like Christmas trees, for example, or they think about roses that they give like on special occasions. Remember, I also showed you some pretty cool pictures of the Sequoia tree. If you've never looked at those, you should look those up. They're really amazing how big these trees are. I mean, like literally, our whole class could put our arms around it and still be gaps missing. Now, this is something I thought was pretty cool, and I just want to remind you about this, is that there are over 260,000 identified plant species, and more are still being continued to found. Now, remember we talked about classification. Plants can be classified as seedless plants or seed plants, and within seedless plants, we have some examples. There is non-vascular seed plants like moss, and there is vascular plants that are seedless, which like a fern. Well, within seed plants, they have gymnosperms and angiosperms as their further subcategorization. All right. Now, some characteristics of plants that are pretty general characteristics when it refers to all plants is they're made of cells, which shouldn't be a surprise because they're eukaryotic. They have a cell membrane, nucleus, and other cell structures. But in addition to their cell membrane, they also have a cell wall. Now, remember, they also have this green pigment within them, and that's called chlorophyll, which is actually found inside the chloroplast, which is an organelle inside the plant, and they use that for photosynthesis, and that's the process where they use light to make energy. Now, something to consider as well is most plants have a large vacuole, and that vacuole is there to regulate water content, which is helpful because the plant needs water, and it can't like travel to the store. It has to depend on being able to store that. Now, the cell wall itself contains cellulose, which is a carbohydrate sugar. Now, as humans, we can digest certain kinds of cellulose, like celery in particular, but some types of cellulose have much larger structures, like bamboo or eucalyptus leaves, which we can't, and as a result, we would need other enzymes to break those down. Now, that's why pandas and koalas can actually eat those, is because they have those additional enzymes to break down those structures, which is pretty fascinating when you think about it. Now let's talk a little bit more about vascular and non-vascular. Okay? Vascular plants are those that have tube-like structures that carry water, nutrients, and other substances throughout the plant, and those structures are the xylem and phloem. Non-vascular plants can absorb water, like aquatic plants, directly through their leaves or across cell membranes via diffusion. Now, as a result, these non-vascular plants tend to stay very small. All right? Now, in fact, let's just think about this. Let's go ahead and talk briefly about these plants. Seedless non-vascular plants grow between 2 to 5 centimeters in height. Remember, like I just told you, based on the fact since they don't have those vessels where they can transport water and other nutrients for, it limits their size. All right. Now, the examples that we did talk about when we talked about some of those plants would include moss, liverwort, and hornwort. In fact, most non-vascular plants are moss. Just thought I'd mention that just so you were aware of that. Now, let's go ahead and let's get into seedless plants. All seedless plants reproduce by spores. What is a spore? Well, a spore is a single-celled reproductive unit capable of giving rise to a new organism. Now, some examples are ferns and horsetail. Okay? Let's see if we can move on. So if you haven't never seen what a fern is, you can just kind of Google these, and the leaves on them are actually referred to as fronds. All right? Now, let's talk about some characteristics of plants that are seed plants. 1, they have vascular tissue. 2, they have leaves. 3, they have stems, which are located above ground and support branches. And 4, they have roots. All right? Now, if you ever need to see what a plant looks like, you can type in plant outline and you can kind of see what it looks like. You can look at some images where they have it labeled, or you can refer to the slides that I showed you before in the past. All right? Now, let me talk about xylem and phloem, because I mentioned those that in seed plants they have these which transport things. Well, with xylem, it flows from the roots to the leaves, so it goes in one direction. Where phloem, water and food flow in both directions. They go up and down, so they transport both ways. So an easy way to remember which is phloem flows both ways, and xylem goes one direction only. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about Gymnosperm and Angiosperm. Seed plants have two ways they carry their seed. There's Gymnosperms, which has an unenclosed seeds. Alright, an example of that would be a pine cone. And then we have Angiosperms, which have seeds that are enclosed within an ovary, which is usually a fruit. An example would be a daffodil flower. But if you think about fruit, think about things like apples, oranges, and other fruits that have seeds. The seeds, if you notice, are enclosed inside that fruit. Okay, so that would be an example of an angiosperm. Alright, now let's just kind of move along. I want to just mention a few other things before we conclude today. Now there are different types of enclosed seeds in regards to angiosperm. There's simple, aggregate, and multiple. I would suggest just Googling those, just taking a look, just reviewing those quickly. Now I did want to talk about one quick little term before I go through a diagram of a plant and then conclude today, and that's the term cotyledon. Cotyledon, which is part of the seed, which is used for food storage. Alright. Now, last but surely not least, let's go ahead and let's break down the plant. Okay, let's talk about what's the female portions of it and what's the male portions. The female portion as a whole, remember, is called the pistil, and it's broken down into the stigma, the style, and the ovary. The male portion of the plant is called the stamen, which is broken up into the anther and the filament. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we're going to conclude our lecture today. If you have any questions about what we covered, or if there's anything else you'd like to know, please leave it in the comments below. Email me. Have a nice day. Take care.